Howdy guys, hope y'all are doing well. Today we're going to go over the topic of Jesus' title, the Bread of Life, and the significance of this title. Now, I've tried to make this video last week, but it ended up being over 25 minutes. I wanted to redo it and try to shorten this thing down a little bit. So we're going to do a little bit different. We're going to start in the Old Testament this time and work our way forward. So just to understand the bread of life, we need to understand where Jesus is drawing from. And it's in Exodus 16, and we're going to start at verse 2, and I'm going to do a bunch of jumping around, so just bear with me, but this is just for the sake of time, because it's a long chapter to cover. So starting in verse 2. The whole congregation of the children of Israel murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. Okay? So this is right after God has rescued Israel out of bondage in Egypt. And now he had brought them in, either in the wilderness, about to go towards the promised land. Now we're going to skip down to verse 4. Then said the Lord unto Moses, Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you. And the people shall go out and gather a certain rate every day, now that I may prove them, or test them, whether they will walk in my law or not, or no. Okay, in verse 5, And it shall come to pass that on the 6th day they shall prepare that which they bring in, and it shall be twice as much as they gather daily. And Moses and Aaron said unto all the children of Israel, At evening, then ye shall know the Lord hath brought you out of Egypt. And in the morning, then ye shall see the glory of the Lord. For he that heareth your murmurings against the Lord, and what are we that ye murmur against us? We'll stop there for the time being. And well, let me read one more verse. Then Moses said, This shall be, when the Lord shall give you in the evening flesh to eat, and in the morning bread to the full, that the Lord heareth your murmuring, which ye murmur against him. And what are we? Your murmurings are not against us, but against the Lord, against God. Okay, so what can we glean for what we just read? First of all, it's taking place in the wilderness, in a deserted place. Okay, they got to gather enough before the Sabbath, that way they can enter into God's rest, into the Sabbath, without trying to toil in vain on the day of the Sabbath. We'll come to that more in a little while. They need to make sure that they take of the gift for. There was one verse I missed in there, but he basically says that they need to take it all before the Sabbath, because if they don't take it all before, then there won't be none left on the Sabbath for them to get. So they need to make sure to take of the food that God's blessed them with that day when he does, the days that he does. So then you see that when this happens, they will first know that the Lord has redeemed them out of bondage. And the second, it says that in the morning they shall see the glory of the Lord. So by waking up and taking of the bread of life that God is giving them in the wilderness, they will, number one, realize that they have been saved from their bondage in Egypt, and that they will see the glory of the Lord. This is important. Now let's skip down to verse 13. Oh no, verse 13. And it came to pass that evening the quails came up and covered the camp, and in the morning the dew lay round about the host. Okay? And when the dew that lay was gone, behold, upon the face of the wilderness there lay a small round thing, as small as the hoarfrost on the ground. And when the children of Israel saw it, they said to one another, It is manna, for they wist not what it was. It's important too. And Moses said unto them, This is the bread which the Lord hath given you to eat. Okay, so God sends them meat and bread. Okay? He's given them meat and bread to survive, to live. Okay? The Jews did not recognize the bread of life. They did not recognize it. They didn't know what it was until Moses told them, This is the bread of life that God has given unto you. Remember that. So, let's go to verse 17. And the children of Israel did so and gathered, some more and some less. And when they did meet it, and with an omer, he that gathered much had nothing over, and he that gathered little had no lack. They gathered every man according to his eating. Okay, this is important too, because they were commanded to gather before the Sabbath. That way they wouldn't be trying to work on the Sabbath, toiling in vain. Now guess what? No matter what they gathered, it was a perfect provision by God. Everybody had the perfect amount, the exact amount they needed to survive and to live. Okay, so verse 19. And Moses said, Let no man leave of it till morning. Notwithstanding, they hearkened not unto Moses, but some of them left of it until morning, and it bred worms and stank, and Moses was wroth with them. Okay, so they were instructed not to leave any. Don't leave it over for the next day. Take and eat today. Don't waste your time. In other words, for us today, take of the bread of life. Do not wait on it. Don't hold back from taking the gift that God has given us, Jesus Christ. Have faith. Take of the gift of salvation, or it will be too late. Okay? So, let's go now to verse 22. And it came to pass that on the 6th day they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for one man, and all the rulers of the congregation came and told Moses. And he said to them, This is that which the Lord hath said, Tomorrow is the rest for the holy Sabbath unto the Lord. Okay? So they had to take of it in order to be able to rest or enter into God's rest that he had prepared on the 7th day. And in verse 26, 6 days ye shall gather it, but on the 7th, which is the Sabbath, there shall be none. Now listen to this part right here. And it came to pass that there went out some of the people on the 7th day for to gather, and they found none. So in other words, these people were supposed to take up the bread of life before the Sabbath, that way they could enter into God's rest, but they did not do so, and so they go out looking for the bread on the Sabbath and don't find any. They're toiling in vain, relying upon their own work and not the word of God, what was told of them. Now this is very important. This is very important, because if we remember, I'm going to throw it on the screen, but might go over this in another video. Remember the 10 virgins who had their oil and those that didn't have their oil. Those that didn't have their oils in the lamp in this parable of Jesus missed the wedding feast of the Lamb. Make sure you take of the gift of God. Do not tarry. Okay? Now let's skip down to verse 32. And Moses said, This is the thing which the Lord commanded. Fill an omer of it to be kept for your generations, that they may see the bread wherewith I have fed you in the wilderness, when I brought you forth from the land. And Moses said to Aaron, Take a pot, and put an omer full of manna therein, and lay it up before the Lord to be kept for generations. And in verse 34, As the Lord commanded Moses, Aaron laid it up where? Before the testimony to be kept. So the bread of life is stored in the Ark of the Covenant next to the 10 Commandments as a remembrance of God saving them. God saving them out of Egypt, out of bondage. Okay? So remember, it is a sign also of their covenant with God. Excuse me. Now we're going to go to the New Testament. Let's go to Mark 6:31. Mark 6:31. Now this is the parallel in Mark. We're going to read from John, but I just wanted to throw this one verse in there. Mark 6:31. And he said unto them, Come ye yourselves apart into a desert place and rest a while. For there were many coming and going, and they had no leisure so as to eat. Now this is the same thing that's about to happen in Mark. This is where Jesus feeds the 5,000. So I just wanted to show you, as the children of Israel were fed in the wilderness, so the Son of Man, Jesus Christ, feeds the children of Israel in the wilderness, in a deserted place. Now, let's go to John. We're going to start on verse 6, verse 5. When Jesus then had lifted up his eyes and saw a great company come unto him, he saith unto Philip, Whence shall we buy bread, that these may eat? Now watch this. And this he said to prove him, for he himself knew what he would do. Now you remember in the Old Testament, in Exodus, where God did certain things to prove or to test the children of Israel. Jesus is testing Philip. He's wanting to see if Philip is going to rely upon him, Jesus, because it says he already knew what he was going to do. Is Philip going to try to rely upon himself, his own works, in order to feed the people, or is he going to rely upon the Son of God to do it? Okay, verse 7. And Philip answered, 200 denarii, or 200 pennies worth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may take a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, saith unto him, There is a lad here, and that which hath 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes, but what are they among so many? They don't get it. They don't understand. Their faith is not where it ought to be at this moment. They've seen Jesus do miracles before this point, but they don't think that Jesus can feed these people with this. And Jesus said, Make the men sit down. Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down, and in the number of about 5,000. And Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed to the disciples, and the disciples to them that were set down, and likewise of the fishes, as much as they would. And when they were filled, he said unto the disciples, Gather up the fragments that remain, that nothing be lost. And therefore, listen to this, they gathered them together and filled 12 baskets with the fragments of the 5 barley loaves, which remained over and above unto them that had eaten. So Jesus feeds the 5,000 with what? With bread and meat. The only difference is God used quail in the Old Testament, Jesus uses fish. And what happens at the end of the feast? He has the disciples go and gather up the leftovers. And how many leftovers are there? 12 small baskets. The Greek is 12 small baskets. Perfect provision of God was given that day. Now we're going to jump to verse 25. And when they had found him on the other side, this is after that, on the other side of the sea, they said unto him, Rabbi, when camest thou hither? Jesus answered them and said, Verily, verily, I say unto you, ye seek me not because ye saw the miracles, but because ye did eat of the loaves and were filled. Labor not for the meat that perishes, but for the meat which endureth unto everlasting life, which the Son of Man shall give unto you. For him hath God the Father sealed. Then they said unto him, What shall we do that we might work the works of God? Now what does he say? Jesus answered and said unto them, This is the work of God, that ye believe on him on whom he hath sent. They said therefore unto him, What sign showest thou then, that we may see and believe thee? What dost thou work? They don't get it. They don't get it. They didn't recognize it. Jesus had literally just performed the sign of who fed them in the wilderness? Who fed them bread in the wilderness? Who gave a perfect provision in the wilderness? Who is there to take the burdens from their backs and to relieve them of their sins? Jesus. He's done all this stuff. In the Old Testament, it was God. And now in the New Testament, you see Jesus doing the same thing. Our fathers, in verse 31, did eat manna in the desert, as it is written, He gave them the bread from heaven to eat. And Jesus said unto them, Verily, verily, I say unto you, Moses gave you not that bread from heaven, but my Father giveth you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is he which cometh down from heaven, and giveth life unto the world. Everybody. Then said they unto him, Lord, evermore give us this bread. Jesus said unto them, I am the bread of life. He that cometh to me shall never hunger, and he that believeth on me shall never thirst. So we are to focus on the spiritual bread from heaven, which is Jesus Christ, the true bread of life. He is the bread that does not see decay, that was come to take us and relieve us of our burdens, to take us out of our bondage to sin, and to save us from our iniquity. What work must we do? Believe on the Son of Man, that he may give us everlasting life. Now you remember that the Jews, when they first saw the bread in Exodus, they did not recognize it. They didn't know what it was. Now if you go to John 1:11, you'll see something similar. John 1:11. He, Jesus, came unto his own, and his own received him not. Just like in the Old Testament, the Jews didn't recognize the bread of life. And here in the New Testament, where the Father sends the true bread from heaven, his Son, to save them and to give them life, they didn't recognize him. They did not recognize who he truly was. Now we're back in John 6 again. We're going to go to verse 40 and 41. And this is the will of him that sent me, that every one which seeth the Son and believeth on him may have everlasting life, and I will raise him up the last day. And the Jews then murmured at him, because he said, I am the bread which came down from heaven. Now notice something. Remember in the Old Testament, we kind of glossed over it, but the Jews were murmuring against God. And what did it say? It said, I'll put the verse on the screen. You're not murmuring against Moses. You're murmuring against God. And who are they murmuring against here? Against Jesus. So, the last thing we covered was in Exodus. Moses was instructed to put the bread of life that God gave them, into the Ark of the Covenant next to the testimony. Okay? To symbolize when God delivered them out of Egypt, and to symbolize the covenant that God has made with them. Now we're going to go to Jeremiah 31:31 to 34, and we're going to see how this pertains to Jesus. Behold, the day is come, saith the Lord, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers, the day I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they break, although I was a husband unto them, saith the Lord. And this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel. After those days, saith the Lord, I will put my law in their inward part, and write it in their hearts, and will be their God, and they shall be my people. Now let's go to Hebrews 8:6. Hebrews 8:6. For finding fault with them, he saith, no, I'm sorry, that's verse 8. Verse 6, my apologies. But now hath he obtained a more excellent ministry, that's Jesus, by how much also is he the mediator of a what? A better covenant, which was established upon the better promises. For if the first covenant had been faultless, then should no place have been sought for the second. So Jesus came to bring in the new covenant, the New Testament, as the bread of life to save us from our sins, to write it upon our hearts and souls, his law and his commandments. And what we must do is do not tarry and allow the bread to, as the Israelites did. Don't tarry and allow it to be too late. Take and eat of the bread of life that is Jesus Christ before too late. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope this was a blessing, and I will have another video coming out soon, probably this weekend. I have another topic. This will be a shorter topic I'm interested in doing. So y'all take it easy, and God bless.